see if we're up. Be sure to mash that like and subscribe button and hit the bell so you know when our next video is. You can find me on Patreon. No, not really. Okay, we are in fact live. Entrez-vous. Because I know we've got at least one person who's online today because they're still waiting for the results of their COVID test. And I thought it would be better for him to just be online than to come here and then all 30 of us find out that we have to quarantine. Because wouldn't that suck? Yeah, so. Okay, so let me just go through the roster real quick, make sure we got everybody that we're supposed to. Kiani, where are you? Okay. Mitchell, where? Okay. Austin, all right. Ben, okay. James, Despain, Luca, all right. Trescott, okay. Julius, okay. Samuel, okay. William Koch, okay. Biswajit, okay. Jeffrey, Tag, okay. Me, I'm here. Gianni, okay. Evan, oui. Min, Monsieur Nguyen. Où est Monsieur Nguyen? Where Blake at? All right, so we're missing him. All right, Jonathan, okay. Andrew, Page. Où est Monsieur Page? Monsieur Page est disparu. Mr. Pandoli. Oh, he's the one who's online. Duh. So, Mr. Pandoli, if you can just post in the chat if you're with us here. Mr. Pruzin, Robert, excellent. Mr. Hunter, Rudes, oui. Enrique, okay. Owen, obviously we'll introduce you. Cody, okay. And Jorge, okay. And Ziyu. You just couldn't get enough of me the last time, did you? So, previous calculus victim. Okay, good. Is there anybody here that I did not call other than you? And we'll deal with you later. No? Okay. All right, so let's get into it then. Welcome to CS101. And hopefully and he's here, excellent. Hopefully a semi-non-pandemic semester, although we got to do this mask garbage for 2 weeks, so sorry. I'm not any happier about it than you guys are, so. C'est la vie. Yeah, let's just kind of dig into it. So let's look at the syllabus for a second. And nothing much specific to say here. I mean, it's a syllabus. You guys have all read syllabi before. My office is over in Goodrich. We're here because we exceeded the capacity of one of the Goodrich computer rooms by a couple, so c'est la vie. Email, put this in the subject line because I've got Outlook, so it highlights messages in different colors. It makes it easier for me to keep track of everything. Because those of you who aren't freshmen don't quite know yet what's about to happen to your email inboxes. Those of you who are not freshmen are laughing, yes. So has the first email war hit yet? No? Okay.
Should I start it up for you?
No, let's not, right. I mean, unless you want to do something about something flippant, such as, is a hot dog a sandwich? Huh? No? Actually, that is an activity we use in some of the mid to upper level math classes, is we have a picture of a bunch of different foods, and you have to draw the line as to where your line is between sandwich and non-sandwich. And it has ham sandwich, sub sandwich, hot dog, calzone, ice cream sandwich, right? I mean, is that a sandwich? Yes. But it doesn't have meat between two pieces of bread, so how can it be a sandwich? Anyway, the point is, like, you have to be really precise about what you mean when you define something. So anyway, syllabus. So yeah, office over in Goodrich. Especially these first few weeks, let's kind of try and work mostly by appointment, but I'm usually around all day and expect to be free most afternoons, especially Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I know on the first day, the last thing you want to think about is the final, and the registrar giveth and the registrar taketh away. So when is our final? Sadly, the last day in the morning. Yes, that sucks. No, you may not take it early. Sorry. So book your plane tickets accordingly if you're going someplace. So we're going to do kind of a smorgasbord of different topics. We're going to start with kind of some digital circuits and you know, what is a computer kind of stuff. We'll talk about some architecture stuff, data representation, what it means to compute, what programming languages look like, what do they have to have, sort of what are the basic building blocks. We'll do some programming in a couple different sort of beginner-friendly languages. We'll talk about algorithm analysis. We'll do most of that with playing cards because that's actually a pretty easy way to get the idea. So we don't really have a book, but when I started teaching this class many, many years ago, we used Computer Science and Overview, and so certainly some of this stuff is drawn from that, but honestly, you guys don't really need to buy anything. Any complaints? Yeah. Think of all the money you're saving that you can then put, like, to subscribe to my Patreon, right? Yeah. Okay. So we'll have handouts that I'll either give you or post stuff to Canvas. We'll use some various pieces of software, some of which is web-based, some of which is also, well, probably a lot of it, you can also download to your own computers for free. And either because the campus owns a license or because it's free software anyway. And obviously I'll post details to that on Canvas. So this is going to be sort of like half math class where, you know, a good chunk of the semester there's going to be like sort of more math class style assignments, and that we're, you know, going to be doing sort of skills building stuff, and then so we'll have assignments for that. A couple of exams, and then a bunch of projects, and we'll post everything to Canvas. Do the homework, don't be an idiot. The projects, don't be an idiot. The core skills exam, which we'll talk about when we get there, but it has a high bar for passing, but you get to retake it if you don't, so, but we'll talk about that. And of course, because the country is not as vaccinated as it should be, we cannot have nice things. This is why we all get to wear masks, and this is why we all still have to worry about testing and all this garbage. So if you're going to be gone for whatever reason, you're sick, you're quarantined, football's going to Allegheny, or whatever, just communicate with me, okay? Hopefully we can avoid a repeat of last fall, because that sucked. And you remember, right? I remember. No? Member Berries, South Park? Anybody? No. Okay, anyway. So special accommodation or disability type stuff, talk with me, ASAP, and obviously Heather Thrush. We have this thing called the Gentleman's Rule. I expect you to abide by it. And like the Constitution, the syllabus is a living document and can be amended as needed. Unlike the Constitution, it's not done by a big convention and stuff. It's done by my dictatorial decree. So, you know, so you guys are lucky. Anyway, pretty basic stuff. I'd like to keep my syllabi real short. The TLDR is don't be a jerk, and we'll have fun. So, Okay, so let's kind of talk. Let me open up just a blank Word document and get you guys thinking for a minute. What is a computer? So drag out some paper, jot down your thoughts, kibitz with your neighbor. What is a computer? Do you guys know the word kibitz? No? It's a Yiddish word. It has two meanings, but one of which is sort of like talk amongst yourselves, kind of. And I'll get you in a minute. So. What, this class? I would hope so, because you were in it. So. I mean, I guess this is sort of like the computer science version of what is a sandwich, but. What is a computer? And Mr. Pendoli, feel free to throw something in the chat there, my friend. And be sure to mash that like button. And actually, we have 4 people connected today. That's interesting. Oh, Dr. Gates is joining us this morning. Good morning, Zach. And I have no idea who the other 2 people are. I'm going to be raking in that ad revenue. Okay, so Dr. Gates says that a computer is our electronic overlord. So Robert, where'd you steal this one from? Wikipedia, dictionary. So, all right, so what do you guys think? Here's a couple things from the chat on Discord, the stream. Our electronic overlord. Okay, fair. An electronic device for storing and processing data, typically in binary form. According to instructions, give it to it in a variable program. That sounds kind of dictionary-y to me, but that's fine. What else? Yes?
Electronic system of some kind that can perform tasks normally impossible. Like if you think of like, I know, it's not necessarily the normal computer we're all thinking about, but like a car, a car, it literally can track and determine things that a normal human could not.
So like a self-driving car kind of thing?
No, just like there's computers in every single car.
Right.
Car you drive, car I drive, and in that computer pretty much, like its sole purpose is to let you know what's wrong with the car, what's going on with the car.
Okay. So like diagnostic stuff. Yeah, okay. So let's say normally impossible for a human. Okay. What else? Yeah.
I just put a mechanism or set of mechanisms that uses algorithms or other automatic features to simplify complex processes.
All right. A mechanism or set of mechanisms that, say the rest of it.
That uses algorithms or other automatic features to simplify complex processes.
Other automatic features to simplify complex processes. Okay. Anything else? Yes?
So it's a type of technology that processes at a much more rapid rate than a human could.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so any quibbles or comments on the things that we've got up here so far? Okay, so what's sort of one common feature of pretty much all the answers? Huh?
As we all generally think of like PC computers.
Okay, and specifically?
It's all technology or
Electronics, right? Okay. Do computers have to be electronic? No. In fact, in the 19th century, they were all mechanical. Even until the early to mid 20th century, there were electromechanical, like calculators and stuff. Okay. So it doesn't have to be electronic, although the secret sauce about the electronic stuff is that it can be really small and really fast. Okay. We're going to look at some pictures and things of different, so the history of computing here in a minute. Okay, but of course nowadays when we say computer, we definitely mean something electronic because they're basically all that. But they don't technically have to be. In fact, would it surprise you to know that the computer used to be a job title, right? You would be employed as a computer to do computations, usually in a large group, supervised by a bunch of mathematicians. And a lot of these computers, so to speak, were doing this during wartime, particularly during World War II. That's when this really exploded. So in that sense, who were the first computers? It's all women, right? Because all the men were off at war. Yeah, so if anybody's seen the movie or read the book Hidden Figures, yeah, so fantastic movie. The book's good. It goes into more depth, but honestly, I think that's a story that the movie tells better than the book, but whatever. Yeah, so all of the ladies that are featured in that movie were computers, effectively, and they had calculators and other aids to help them to accelerate their work. And one of the sub-themes of that movie is, which there's one of the computers that figures out the big computer that they can't fit through the door and all that sort of stuff. And then that becomes, then she trains all of her coworkers about, okay, here's how, this is going to put us out of business, so we better learn how to manage this thing because otherwise we'll all be out of jobs. And basically that's exactly what happened. And the other thing that we've talked about here is speed, right? The fact that electronics can operate really, really quickly means that a computer can do certain kinds of tasks way faster and way better than a human, but not all of them, okay? Because a computer has to be running some sort of program. And that program can vary. It can have different, things in it, but you have to be a lot more specific when you program a computer. A good example of this would be, hi, I'm new to Wabash. How do I get to Spark Center? I'm hungry. I'm standing right here. How do I get to Spark Center? Well, you giving me the instructions as a human, like, you go up the stairs, turn right, it's this building over here, right? I can usually probably follow it. Would that be good enough if I were a robot? Hello, I am a robot. I am hungry. No, probably not going to work, right? So the language you have to speak is different. and we'll kind of look at all of that. And Dr. Gates is not wrong in a sense because, you know, now computers are involved in pretty much everything you do every day in some way, shape, or form. You know, it would maybe be surprising, but also not surprising, that in the 1950s, how many computers do you think were on this campus? 0. Okay, it wasn't until the 60s that the campus got its first computer, singular, and it was the size of several refrigerators and lived in the basement of Baxter. Yeah, so, and of course, now, how many computers are in just this room? There's 30 laptops that came with the room. There's 20-something of you guys, all of whom are toting smartphones around. Anybody who has a smartwatch, there's another one. Anybody who has a tablet, there's another one. You know, there's my laptop, my tablet, my phone, my iPad, my Stream Deck, right? The thing that's controlling the screens, the projectors, right? They're everywhere. Just ridiculous quantities now. So they've proliferated, so to speak. All right. So let's talk about sort of the history of computing from the beginning to today. And this is a deliberately, horribly incomplete, horribly brief, but it'll just kind of give us an overview of several thousand years of computing history. Has anybody ever heard of this thing? Yeah? Okay, wouldn't shock me, right? The Antikythera mechanism. And in fact, nowadays, that's probably some rare content from the History Channel that does not involve World War II and Nazis or ancient aliens. Okay, but hey, whatever. So this thing called the Antikythera mechanism, it doesn't look like much, but it was discovered off of the island of Antikythera, which is in the Aegean, and it's the island before the island of Kythera, hence Antikythera. It's before that one. And it's essentially a mechanical calculator that, as best as we can tell, was able to compute and sort of display the positions of the stars, the sun, the moon, the eclipse cycle that you were in, and all of that. And the dating of this is a little tricky, but we think it's from anywhere from 200 BC to 280, somewhere in that range. Okay, so definitely Greek in origin. It also has, interestingly enough, on one of the sides is an instruction manual for it. There's just one minor problem. Hope you've studied your Greek, because it's written in Greek, as things were back then, right? So this thing basically was found by pearl divers in the early 20th century off this island, and it had been like, there was a shipwreck. It was on a shipwreck, and it sunk to the bottom, and they found all kinds of other stuff with it, and then this thing, which is kind of like, what on earth is it? So it's been sitting for 2,000 years in seawater and mud, and hence why it looks like crap. It broke into pieces. We only have some of the pieces, yeah. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is, in the range of 200 BC to 280, what did people think about the way the universe was structured? Yeah. The universe or the Earth? So actually, they did not think that the Earth was flat. That whole Columbus thing, that's garbage. The Greeks knew it was a sphere, and in fact had computed the radius of it to within about 10% of its correct value, which is impressive because you know how they measure the distance of an arc of it? they marched an army from one city to another. Right, so it works, right? Yeah. But, okay, so they knew the Earth was a sphere, but what was the arrangement of the solar system? Yeah. Right, exactly. The Earth was fixed and in the center, and so it was a geocentric model, and everything, including the sun, orbited the Earth in a circular, or, well, they had to do some funny business for the planets, but, yeah, so it was built according to a geocentric model, but it still works, right? And, yeah, as you guys will learn if you take some physics, no frame of reference is any more privileged than any other, so, yeah, it works. And there's all kinds of really interesting stuff about it. I mean, there's books and papers galore if you want to learn more. Just bug me. Flash forward to the 19th century, and probably the first things that got programmed, so to speak, were weaving looms. These were introduced by Jacquard in France, and they would be programmed, so to speak, with these cards that had holes in them in various positions. And that would basically, the weaving loom would either do like an under or an over or whatever based on the sequence of holes. And so you could sort of automate some of the tedium of doing patterned weaving and then therefore produce more product and make more money and so on. This means that, of course, the first computer programmers, in a sense, were also women, because who else would be working in a weaving loom? Yeah. Also in the 19th century, on the mechanical side, we have this thing. This is not an original. He never finished it. So Charles Babbage in the mid-19th century designed this thing called the difference engine. And the idea was to take the human out of computation. And specifically what he wanted to do with this thing was to be able to make tables of stuff that you would use in navigation. This being the 19th century, people still sailing around the world, and being British for that matter, this was a big deal, and so Parliament funded it, but basically he got halfway kind of through building the thing, he thought, oh, you know, I could do something even better and make a full computer. And eventually Parliament got tired of his garbage and cut him off, and he never actually finished the thing. So this is a modern reproduction, basically, from all of his notes and stuff and the pieces that we have. It was funded, well, sort of supervised by the British Science Museum, and they basically found some rich internet guy to fund the reproduction of it. And he said, well, I'll fund the reproduction of it, but I want you to make two, not one. And so the first one is in the London Science Museum. The second one, which is what's pictured here, for quite some time was at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California, and now is in the guy's living room. So if you're a rich tycoon. So interestingly enough, the fact that it's going to be in his living room, they had to grease the gears and stuff in order to get it to work well. And the wife of this internet tycoon basically made them use food-grade stuff because it was going to end up in the living room. So, yeah. I've seen both of them because I've been to the London Science Museum. I went specifically to see this and the one in Mountain View. And you can kind of just barely see it over on the right-hand end. There's this little knob stick now. That's actually a big hand crank. And so when it was at the Computer History Museum, they'd crank the thing every afternoon at like 2 o'clock and do a demonstration. It also had what might be considered the first accessory because this is a printer. And so it would compute and then print the numbers, and then you would have a table that was perfectly computed, no human error introduced. So it's really neat to see it in action. Yeah. The one at the London Science Museum is just in a glass case, which is boring, but So Babbage, in the midst of developing that, realized that he could do something, started designing this thing called the Analytical Engine, which would be able to do something that the difference engine couldn't. The difference engine basically could just do number crunching using a mathematical technique called the method of finite differences, but whatever. I wouldn't say that that's a computer. So the distinction I make between computer and calculator is that a computer is capable of making decisions of the if X then Y variety. So like, if something is true, I do one thing, otherwise I do another thing. Calculator, I would say, wouldn't be able to do that. Now, how many of you guys have the TI graphing calculators? Those, I would argue, are computers because they can make those sorts of decisions. But if you just get your idiot calculator from Walmart, it's not really going to be able to do. So, I mean, it's nowadays kind of an artificial distinction, but that's kind of what I would use. So anyway, he never finished building this thing either because he ran out of money and stuff, and to my knowledge, nobody has produced a full working replica of it. It's, we only have fragments and pieces, so yeah. Oh, and by the way, going back to the difference engine, the reproduction of it, they did it to period spec. So they said, okay, we're going to make this using metalworking techniques and tolerances that would have been available to Babbage in the 19th century to see if he actually could have done it, right? And they did, right? So the material science is probably a little better than what Babbage had, but as much as possible, they built it to period spec. One of the first computer programs that would have run on the difference engine, had it ever been built, was written by Ada Lovelace. Now, do I have any English majors in the crowd? Or anybody who might be an English major, minor? How many of you guys have ever heard of Lord Byron, poet? Yeah? Ada Lovelace was his daughter. So she basically got really interested in this and worked very much with Bernoulli, and so this is, in fact, the first real computer program. And this page is on display at the British Museum. Or excuse me, not the British Museum, the British Library. So that was kind of neat to see. Anybody recognize that guy? Yeah? So during World War II, what did the Germans have that was really a pain in the butt? Well, yes. Yeah, they had U-boats, they had really good planes, they had rockets, they had, big armies, good tanks, but they had this thing, which is the Enigma. And this thing did encryption. And so what would happen is you would type a message letter by letter on the keyboard, which is where the guy's hands are, and when you hit a key, so like his finger is on the Z key, and by the way, you might be wondering why the Z key is there, because what should be there in English? Y. Okay, but the German keyboard layout's different, so get used to it. Anyway, so you'd hit that button, and then one of the corresponding letters on the light panel would light up, and that would be what you would actually transmit to the recipient. And you would keep doing this. Now, what made this machine diabolical is if you hit the Z key a second time, what letter would light up? Not the same one as before. Right? So let's say you hit the Z key and the A key lights up, the A light comes on. Then you hit it again. It's going to be a completely different letter. Okay? And the way it worked was there were these series of rotors that every time you hit a key, the rotors would advance one position, and there were wires built into these things, and so it would scramble the letters, and the rotors had to be in the correct positions to start in order to decode it, or else you'd just get gibberish. And so one of the things you had to do at the very beginning was transmit which page out of the code book and which line out of that code book were the rotor settings that you were going to use. And then every 2 weeks or whatever, they issued new code books so that if one got captured, it wouldn't do you any good after a couple weeks, right? So this thing was just diabolically complicated. And there was a big effort in this place, Bletchley Park, in England, to figure out how to crack it. And they were able to do so with some success. Although a lot of it came down to basically German code operators being lazy and reusing the same rotor settings over and over because, well, they're humans, we're lazy, right? And also being able to capture some code books and actual machines and stuff as the war progressed. So, yeah. A lot of the work was done at Bletchley Park was done by this guy. Anybody know who that is? Yeah. Yep, it's Turing. So he is now on the 50-pound British note, so British cash. Mathematician, and you might say one of the fathers of computing in a theoretical sense. He basically was one of the chief mathematicians at the Bletchley Park project, and did a number of very famous things before that, but obviously that was sort of one of his crowning achievements. So anybody know what happened to this guy? Yeah.
Well, he was homosexual, and the British government did not appreciate that.
Nope, not back then. It was illegal. So they basically gave him an alternative. You can go to prison, or you can take hormone injections to suppress your libido. And he chose the second option, and then eventually was fed up with it and killed himself by putting cyanide on an apple and then taking a bite out of it. There's some speculation that that's why the Apple computer logo is what it is, but I think that's partly apocryphal. Now, the British government has since come to its senses that being gay is not criminal, and have sort of exonerated him, so to speak, and now he's on the 50-pound British note. So, yeah. Okay, so in the 40s in the U.S., one of the things that was being worked on was sort of electromechanical computers to try and do naval computations for like naval bombardment trajectories for artillery and things like that. And the American effort, there was the ENIAC. There actually was a German guy who had a basically working computer named Konrad Zuse, and he used telephone relays. And I mean, these things would have been the size of rooms, possibly that you could fit aboard ship, but it was never quite ready. Yeah, so that was sort of, and has anybody been to the Smithsonian in DC? They have a chunk of this thing in their computing history display. I mean, obviously not the whole thing because it's gigantic. And one of the chief people that worked on that was this lady, Grace Hopper. So here's a picture of her from 1960. Here's a picture of her from the 80s. So interestingly enough, she was the oldest person to ever be active duty military. So when the war broke out, she basically resigned her professorship at Vassar and joined the Navy. And because she was a mathematician, they put her to work on stuff like this. And what would basically happen is she'd get assigned to a project, she'd complete it, she'd retire, then a few years would go by and they'd be like, crap, we need Grace. And they'd bring her out of retirement and do something. And so she retired as a Commodore, which is a rank that doesn't exist anymore, so it'd be equivalent to a Rear Admiral lower half, if any of you know your naval terminology. Yeah, so Amazing Grace, they called her. She is also the person who invented the word debugging. Okay, so what did she mean when she said debugging? Well, let's go back to this. See all those cabinets? They were having weird behavior one day, and so she opened up one of them, and what did she find inside? A bunch of actual insects, like moths and stuff. And so she starts pulling all this crap out, and somebody asks, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm debugging. And the term stuck. And yeah, so there you go. Okay, this is what made everything really take off. This little guy, called the Transistor. And I brought one of them with me. And you guys will use some next week. It's tiny, right? Super tiny. And most of the stuff at the bottom is just wires to put it into a breadboard. Okay, before this, what you had to use for switches were either telephone relays, which would have been like the size of my fist, or a vacuum tube, which would be like the size of a light bulb. Now, anybody ever had to deal with a vacuum tube? Like any extreme audiophiles? No, they have all since gone the way of the dodo. And this thing replaced them. So much smaller, consumed way less energy, and invented at Bell Labs in 1947. And that's what changed the game big time, because you could take what would have been ENIAC and scrunch it down into something much more manageable, or if you stayed with the size of the ENIAC, you could just do astronomically faster and more, right? So that was sort of the trade-off. And that is, like I said, what changed the game. And then going forward a little bit, so here's a picture of the guys from Bell Labs, was the first integrated circuit where you put these things onto something, and here's a better picture of sort of a modern one. So the integrated circuit is just this little thing that looks like an H in the middle. The rest of it is just packaging, right? But you could fit millions upon millions of transistors on one of these things. Now, at first, there weren't that many. At first, there were maybe on the order of thousands. Okay, but now in your computer processor, there's billions of them. It's just scaled up. Yeah, so this also kind of changed the game because it allowed you to pack a lot more into a smaller space. And because of integrated circuits becoming available, people like Apple could do something like this. So this is a picture of an Apple I from the mid-'70s. And you could get integrated circuits for almost all of your components. Memory, your processor, things that would connect to the keyboard and handle the interface, and stuff that would connect to a TV or whatever to display whatever you're working on. And they sold these things. So the Apple I kit sold for, you'll love this. You guys, anybody know how much? $666. Because Steve Jobs has a sense of humor, right? Or had, I guess. But yeah, so you would buy this as a kit, and you had to put it together yourself and build your own case for it. And then sort of flash forward, in 1977, there were 3 big computers released for the mini computers, or actually microcomputers. The Apple II, the TRS-80, and the Commodore PET. And that really spawned sort of the personal computer revolution, where you could have one of these things on your desk. In 1984, Apple launched this guy, the Macintosh. And then, you know, this is when computers became things that sat on your desk rather than things that were in a closet to most people. But there are still computers that sit in closets, and we call them supercomputers. Okay, so this is a picture of a couple of pieces of the IBM Roadrunner. Then there's also this guy, the NVIDIA or IBM Titan, which has, it's called the Titan because what does it have? A bunch of them. Titan GPUs, okay, which has totally changed the game for certain kinds of computation, for machine learning and stuff. And that's how something like a Tesla self-driving car could work. So Neuralnet, it's actually all working on graphics hardware, not, well, hardware similar to graphics cards, right? So has anybody tried to buy a graphics card in the last 18 months? good luck, right? Unless you want to pay twice MSRP, it's either that or lining up at 4 in the morning out front of a Best Buy or a Micro Center, because otherwise you're SOL. Yeah, and it's because graphics card hardware, well, several reasons. Low supply, high demand, but the reason that there's high demand is because what can you do with a high-end graphics card? Well, you can play Crysis at 4K and Cyberpunk at 4K, and it'd be really awesome, right? But what else can you do with it? Yeah, you can mine Ethereum. Well, great. Right, and so, yeah. This is why we cannot have nice things. All right, so this is a hopelessly incomplete overview of CS. And the first assignment I'm going to give you guys, and I'll post it up to Canvas here shortly, is a couple of videos that I've found from a documentary in the early 90s on the history of computing. And the first two of them go into quite a bit more depth, but they also have some interviews with people that know what they were talking about. And then a podcast that actually Dr. Gelbin told me about that kind of talks a little bit more about Grace Hopper, which is kind of interesting. So, all right, so our last piece of business for the day, Mr. Runge, if you would be so kind as to take the microphone so that our online friends can hear you, and introduce yourself.
All right. I am your SI leader for this year, for this class. So essentially what SI is it's supplemental instruction. It's learning in addition to the stuff you do in class. It is not it's not a place where you go to do like homework questions, project questions like that. That's for the QSC, but this is more like expanding on what you learn in class in different ways. So we will meet every Sunday and Tuesday, 7 to 7:50 p.m. in Goodrich 305. It's the building all the way over there near the armory. It's totally voluntary. You don't have to do it, but data shows that if you attend regularly, you will have a better grade in the class. It's also anonymous. He won't know anything about you going or how many times when you go.
Which is going to be a little tough because when we get to the project-based part of the semester, we're going to have to bend the rules a little bit, but we'll figure that out.
Yep. I think that might be all.
Yeah. So Owen has access to the Canvas page, and so one of the things he's going to do is send out announcements about like, hey, SI, tonight I'm going to be doing blah, 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 come by, and stuff like that. And he'll be coming to class every day. Yeah, so. All right, any questions, preguntas, or fragens? No? All right, so Friday what we're going to do is take apart computers and put them back together. So bring a bunch of screwdrivers and a bunch of old computers. Has anybody built their own PC before? Yeah, okay, so for a number of you guys this will be kind of like ancient technology because it's not going to be stuff with high-end GPUs. It's, you know, Dells from 15 years ago, but yeah, for those of you who have never done it, it's going to be hopefully pretty enlightening to see actually what's inside the box and what are all the different important components. So, yeah, that's what we'll do Friday, and I'll see you guys then.